homeschooling isn't always picture perfect. Welcome to Homeschooling with Dr. B, where we'll help you find solutions to the challenges you face and celebrate your successes with you. Now, please welcome your host, Dr. B.
Welcome back to Nation's Homeschool Tribe. Today we're going to be talking about improvising, adapting, and thriving. Have you ever seen Bear Grylls, the British adventurer, writer, television presenter, businessman? He's also involved in a number of wilderness survival television series, both in the United Kingdom and the United States. I think the most famous one here is Man vs. Wild. And he has the saying, improvise, adapt, overcome. Well, as everything in homeschooling, I changed it up to meet my needs. And with us, it's improvise, adapt, thrive. If you have been listening to my podcast, reading the blogs, you know that my personal homeschool journey is very different than that of my children. I was on school for a couple of years. And as a result, I developed these enormous gaps in knowledge and basic skills. And I spent a lot of time overcoming those gaps. It was really difficult, and it truly never stopped being difficult. And that was something I did not want for my children. So I never want them to have to overcome being homeschoolers. And that is in part why I changed Bear Grylls' saying to improvise, adapt, and thrive. I want them not to overcome, but to thrive in the homeschool setting. So as a homeschooling mom, what does it mean for me when I say improvise? Well, I'm talking about creating or performing spontaneously without preparation. And in our homeschool setting, that has many different meanings. In the past, I used to read a lot of books with funny voices. I used to have finger puppets. I would act out a play, dance to memory games. So improvise based on whatever it was that we were doing. And frankly, that is so against my nature to improvise. Like I've said many times before, I have a very structured and rigid brain, but I've been forcing it to change, to unlearn and relearn new skills. And one of them is improvisation. As we begin the high school years, I find myself lapsing back into that rigidity, wanting to stay in the homeschool room rather than going out and doing things differently. So I really have to constantly remember that it is important for me to model improvisation for my kids. And the reality is that some of them are more open than the others. But we're working on it. We're really working on it. One of the things that we're going to do in our sociology course this year is, rather than just sticking to lectures in midterms and finals, we are going to do some of that. We're also going to do some classical group projects, such as going out there and breaking a social more, or more, depending on how you want to pronounce it. People pronounce it differently. In any case, this will be something completely new for my kids. And part of that experience is improvising themselves when they're going through the process of breaking the social more. In the past, my students had a great time when they went through this group project. But I can honestly say they did get themselves in some trouble. One of the things that I always told them when they did this was, listen, don't break any laws. And of course, what did they do? They broke the law. One of them did it by taking a bath in the fountain square. So, very cute. I got a call from a police officer saying, I understand that you told your students to. And Of course, I bail my students out. But that's not what I'm looking to do with my kids. I'm looking for them to explore and find themselves in situations in which they need to improvise without breaking the law. One of my other students, what they did was they pulled out a board game in the middle of an aisle at a supermarket store. And people were definitely thrown off a loop, right? And so then they recorded people's reactions, and my students had a lot of fun. And there's other tons of little projects that they did that I'm going to start incorporating into my kids' curriculum. So they learn some of that improvisation, not just on my part, but on their own. Of course, the next component of this mantra is adaptability. Means the ability to be flexible and adjust to changing factors, conditions, or environments. Definitely a key for my homeschooler and for the world. Anybody going through this pandemic knows that we've had to adapt on a personal level, on a community level, state and national level, and even global level. So very key component for my homeschoolers. The key component here is both for us as homeschooling parents and for our homeschoolers is to give up the idea of how things should be done or how things should happen. I remember when I was still teaching, I often had students say to me, "You're treating us like kindergartners, giving us these group projects. This is not what college is supposed to be like." I always thought it was really funny because if it's your first year in college, how do you know what college is supposed to be like? What makes you think that it has to be rigid lecture halls where all you do is take notes and take tests? That's not what college is supposed to be like. But when you think about it, most of the kids, when they go on to college, they're still in their teen years. And there's a certain rigidity, this idea that they know, that they understand what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. And we as adults also tend to get trapped into it. But the reality is that nothing has to be the way that we're told that it is. We can adjust, we can create, we can cut components, we can unite different components, both to create new activities, new experiences, or simply a lesson. In my English course, I don't actually have my kids do a lot of writing. We primarily focus on literature because that writing component, we do it either through literature, through science, through language, through history, social studies, etc., etc., etc. And sometimes I do create lessons that bridge all of the classes. It brings components from each class. Another big component of adaptability is problem solving. And I really do my best to challenge my kids to the absolute max on this. I tell them life is like playing Tetris. If a piece doesn't fit here, then does it fit over here? Or can you turn it around? Can you adjust it? Can you trim it? I mean, there's so many different things that we can do to make things work, including tossing out something that does not fit in our life or lifestyle or our ideal of homeschooling. One of my favorite things that I did when they were middle schoolers was I would give them a physical science project and I would say, okay, I need you to get from point A to point B. But I wouldn't tell them how to get there. They had to come up with the plan and the idea. They had to figure out how to work with each other to get there. And sometimes their idea worked on the first go, sometimes on the second, sometimes it didn't work at all. They had to scratch it and start back. And I really like that. When we discuss literature, we don't just discuss the different components of a plot mountain or the point of view. We also discuss, what if something changed? What if something was slightly different? When we were reading Of Mice and Men, and George kills Lenny. One of the things that I asked was, what if the group had not been there? Would George have felt compelled to protect Lenny by killing him? Would he have felt that he had no other choice? Could this situation happen today? Why or why not? Think about what the resources that are available today versus the resources that used to be available in the past. Does that change the situation? So really try to push them to be critical, analytical thinkers and also problem solvers. That's part of the adaptability, right? And last but not least, to thrive. Teaching should not be a chore. It should be a joy. I believe that with all my heart. That doesn't mean that we don't have fears. It doesn't mean that we don't have doubts. It doesn't mean that we don't have bad days. We have all of that. But if we learn to adapt, we learn to improvise, we can thrive. Allow yourself to have fun. I can't tell you the number of times that I ended up participating on some group project. Not doing it for them, no, but maybe creating my own thing or being part of the team or being a facilitator, standing on the sidelines, being the cheerleader. I really enjoy all of those things. Researching something that I would have never considered researching because the kids are interested in it or because they need to understand it. So allow yourself to have fun, not just during the parties or during the field trips, but while you're teaching, while you're preparing to teach. Explore new ideas, new interests, old interests. Don't be afraid to dust off the classics. Don't assume that the kids won't enjoy Moby Dick or the Christmas Carol. My kids had a blast with the Christmas Carol. I think that was a year ago. We studied language by reading the story. We did caroling. We created ornaments. We dressed up. And it was an absolute blast. They enjoyed it, and I enjoyed being part of it. I can't begin to tell you how excited I was to be teaching sociology this year. I love sociology. I discovered it. I think I must have been a sophomore in college. My bachelor's degree is in sociology. I have a master's in sociology. I did 2 specialized tracks in sociology, social problems and research methods. Just really enjoyed it. And I so look forward to teaching it to my kids and to expanding their ideas about how society functions and why it is that society doesn't always work the way that we think it should work. And as we started to go through the first couple of lectures, I found myself in the situation where I was having some flashbacks to when I was a professor and my students didn't enjoy the first 3 lectures. And I said to my kids, okay, so the first one, most people find boring, but I, went into it with as much enthusiasm as I had in the past and probably twice as much because these are my kids. And one of my kids said, I don't know why you said this was going to be boring, Mom. This is so interesting. So when I went on to do the second lecture, instead of introducing it by saying, well, my students didn't like this lecture because they never really particularly enjoyed the first 3. We're dealing with theories and we're dealing with research methods. I said, this is going to be so interesting because these men created a system that allows us to explain the world and make predictions based on their theories. And I just jumped in and the kids were so excited. We started talking about some of the classic examples I used to use and then introduce new examples that are current, that my kids could relate to. And it was wonderful the way that the 2 tied together. That was a wonderful experience for me as a mother. I was so excited. Now, We're entering our 7th year of being a homeschooling family. I find that so unbelievable. We had our ups, we had our downs, but it has been our ability to pivot that has been a major benefit to us in homeschooling. To improvise, adapt, so that we could thrive. We've been through a lot, right? I used to run a co-op. We used to go on so many field trips when we were doing our homeschooling individually. There are so many funny stories. Like the day one of my kids turned around too fast and I accidentally stuck my foot in pitch and poop and slipped and slided, and the kids were laughing. I could have broken my neck, but every time that I think about it, I want to laugh. Because then it became this whole lesson about the composition of poop. It was just funny. It was fun. And they learned a lot. We've been through this past year, which was incredibly difficult for everybody, with the pandemic and everything that it has meant to our ability to socialize and connect as human beings. We've been able to improvise, adapt, and thrive, even under these conditions. So now I am super excited about high school, the increasing level of complexity in our discussions, teaching more advanced subjects. And yes, I'm excited about dissecting a cow heart, a cow eye, frog, chicken, and I forget what else the system that we're following does. I'm super excited about that. I'm especially excited for my child who's interested in the forensic science. I welcome the opportunity to explore the hard sciences on a new level and just to continue to grow up and be part of my homeschoolers' developmental journey. So remember, life can be overwhelming, but homeschooling doesn't have to be. You can improvise, adapt, and thrive. Don't forget to check our homeschooling support group on Facebook by searching for Homeschooling with Dr. B or finding the link on our website. Till next week, enjoy your kiddos.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Homeschooling with Dr. B. Head over to homeschoolingwithdrb.com for more information and resources. That's homeschoolingwithdrb.com. Until next time.